how bad is it out there for the Democrats? And now listen, if it sounds a little bit like I'm gloating, a little bit like I'm happy by it, it's been a while since Republicans have had a really good election season. And suddenly we're turning into one. And it's largely because of the Democrats' own forced errors. Here's CNN.
I just want to show you, this is the NBC poll from over the weekend. Is the country on the wrong track? Is the country on the wrong track? 93% of Republicans say that. We live in polarized times. Maybe that's not shocking. Overall, though, 71% of Americans say that. 70% of independents say that. And nearly half of Democrats, the president's own party, think we're off on the wrong track. And if you look, as we're going to watch Virginia results tomorrow, as we head into the midterm election climate, who's stronger, the poll asks, on border security? Republicans by 27 points. On inflation, Republicans by 24 points. On the economy, Republicans by 18 points.
Here's MSNBC.
But I look at the advantages that Republicans have, and what jumps out here, I think it's this one. It's on the question of the economy. We ask in this poll, which party do you think would do a better job handling these issues? By an 18-point margin, voters in this poll saying Republicans on the economy.
Now, I got to play you some audio. This is not parody audio. This is not someone joking. This is someone being serious. MSNBC has their analyst, Jason Johnson. Yeah, I played some audio of him earlier on the critical race theory stuff. This is what MSNBC's audience, of which there are 5 or 6 people in Rio Linda, California, this is who they're listening to.
Why isn't Merrick Garland screaming about this every single day? Why isn't the president screaming about this every single day, at least from a symbolic standpoint? Nicole, I can tell you, before we even get to the specifics of this is also, believe it or not, in a larger macro political sense, this is also why Biden's numbers are where they are. Those people who voted for him, those Americans who actually believe in this country, believe in democracy, including people who didn't vote for Biden but are certainly not insurrectionist terrorists, they feel like they got punched in the face on January 6th. They saw the whole country get attacked. And they want a president who's going to fight back. They want a president who talks about these terrorists the same way that we heard George Bush and Bill Clinton talk about terrorism for 20 years. They want to hear that about these people. It seems like they're being treated with kid gloves. And a lone committee that has limited power, that's hamstrung by basically a whole bunch of Benedict Arnolds on the Republican Party, is not going to be enough to keep us safe.
If you don't understand that, what Jason Johnson on MSNBC is saying is that if Joe Biden would start treating the Republicans like domestic terrorists, his polling would go up. That the reason Biden's polling is so low is because Joe Biden is not being nasty enough to Republicans. He needs to treat them like the terrorists they are. You just heard him. I'm not making it up. The polling is bad out there for Democrats. This is going to be a little bit broken record. It is. It's going to be a little bit repetitious. It is. But I do it and I say it and I repeat it because you have to get it. You have to understand it. It is necessary for you to understand what's coming. The Democratic Party and the media are convinced Republicans are bad. Not bad politically, but bad people. They're convinced of it. They are convinced that the Republican Party is a threat to democracy. They are convinced the Republican Party will impose an authoritarian, and we are maybe a half step away from Hitler. They're convinced that they are convinced. They're convinced Donald Trump is a racist. They're convinced he's a white supremacist. They are convinced that we are a half step, maybe a full step, but mostly a half step away from having a tyrant who will overthrow the Constitution and impose himself and his will on America contrary to constitutional norms. That's why you have Jason Johnson, a black progressive analyst on MSNBC, when asked to explain why Joe Biden's polling is so low, says it's because Joe Biden's not doing enough to fight the terrorists, and the terrorists are you and me. They become convinced of it. It's why voters who don't agree with them are vilified. It really has everything to do with why people who are pro-vaccine but against the mandate, why they are vilified. Because they're not on the Democrats' side, and the Democrats realize it. And this is all about drawing the battle lines for the coming fight. Just ask yourself this question. If you are convinced you are all that stands in the way between democracy and Nazis, what would you do? If you're convinced of that, and the Democrats and the media, major voices in the media, anchors at CNN and MSNBC, they're convinced of this now. And the problem is that you are not. They have expended enormous emotional energy to try to convince you, and you're not. NPR has a poll out. Yes, that NPR, National Public Radio, they have a poll out. Marist has done a poll for them. Democrats are more likely to be viewed in this polling as a threat to democracy than Republicans. Now, only by a point among all the people surveyed, but it's still, this is Marist for NPR, not exactly conservatives, and they got a poll out where Democrats are a point ahead of Republicans on who's a bigger threat to democracy. When you look at independents, however, independent voters who are unaffiliated, Democrats are 10 points ahead of the GOP on the question of who's a bigger threat to democracy. It's 41% of independents say Democrats, 31% of independents say Republicans. The rest say neither or both. And yet Democrats have spent an inordinate amount of time in the last year, particularly after January 6th, trying to tie every single Republican to January 6th. And the message has not gone over with people. Now, why hasn't the message gone over with people? Because Democrats and the media are obsessed with the Republicans becoming the next Hitler. You, on the other hand, are obsessed with filling up your gas tank without going bankrupt. You're just trying to make a living. And the Democrats are making that harder. You who are working are overworked because you're understaffed because the Democrats have subsidized people staying unemployed. You go try to get gas and it's more expensive because between shortages and regulation, the gas price has gone up. Don't look now. Joe Biden is announcing new methane standards that are going to drive up the cost of a gallon of gasoline even further. The cost of the gas and the energy has translated into higher food prices. You go try to get a burger, the cost has gone up. You go try to get anything at the grocery store, the cost has gone up if you can find it because the store shelves are still backed up and there are still shortages. And the Democrats are telling you the reason there are shortages is because you're buying too much. You've got it good. Your income's gone up and you're buying so much, you're to blame. It's kind of like they've lost the message. The Democrats hate you so much. They don't have an optimistic message or vision for the country because you are bad, because you have not internalized the racist Hitler-like politics of the GOP and aren't doing enough to stop them. Only the Democrats can see it. They're convinced of it, that only they can see it, and the media screams about it because the media is on their side and you aren't convinced. And now here's the problem. And I need you to pay attention to me on this. I am deadly, deadly serious about this. You have two new problems here. Problem one, the Democrats in the United States of America are convinced that they and they alone can stop the Republicans giving rise to American Hitler. The media is with the Democrats. They are convinced that the Republican Party is an authoritarian regime hell-bent on the destruction of democratic norms and the end of our republic. And they're angry with you for getting worked up about critical race theory. They're angry with you for worrying about gas prices. and they're angry with you for worrying about food shortages. But wait, the Democrats and the media also believe something else. They believe we are less than 10 years away from the destruction of planet Earth and our way of life. They believe that if we do not take radical action now, that something bad is going to happen and we're all going to die. That's why they're so worked up about Let's Go Brandon, because it, one, shows that so many Americans aren't taking them seriously. It shows them, two, too many Americans have sided with the Republican authoritarianism, and three, they can't get anything done on Capitol Hill. So you've got Democrats who really believe that only they can stop the rise of American Hitler, and you've got Democrats who believe that only they are committed to saving the planet. It's not a far jump from here to the Democrats being the ones who upend democracy. It's not a far leap from here to say that the Democrats are the ones who, in their mind, for our own good, save us from ourselves. You've got a Congress that can't pass the Green New Deal. They are as epistemically convinced that they must pass this to save the planet as they are epistemically convinced that Republicans are the destruction of the Republic. And if you've got a Democratic Party and an American press corps that are equally convinced Republicans are going to put Hitler in power and undermine our republic, and if they can't get climate done through a broken Congress where the filibuster exists, we're all going to die, it's not a hard leap to the Democrats becoming the violent threat to democracy they say the Republicans are. And they believe both of these things. And if they truly do believe them, don't they have to act? They've got to act to stop the rise of Hitler, and they've got to act to save the planet. They've got to do something. It's why you have the New York Times and the New Yorker fawning over a new book that encourages environmentalists to become terrorists, to blow up pipelines. And it's why independent voters in NPR's own polling, a plurality of independent voters, think Democrats are the bigger threat to democracy than Republicans, because they are. If you really believe the other side is as bad as Democrats have internalized the GOP to be, and you really believe we're less than 10 years from saving the planet, you've got to act. And you clearly can't act within Democratic bounds because those Hick Rube voters are about to put the GOP back in charge and block climate change progress altogether. And freaking Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are stopping it in the Senate. You've got to do something. This doesn't end well if the Democrats really are as convicted about these things as they claim. It really doesn't end well for any of us, and you can see it coming.